Picture this. It is a Tuesday afternoon in March of 2026 inside Magic Kingdom. You are standing on the bridge that leads from the Central Plaza into Frontierland. To your right, behind a tall blue construction wall that has been there for over 18 months, is the place where Tom Sawyer Island used to be. The wall has a poster on it showing a future attraction that does not yet exist. To your left, behind another construction wall, is the area where Disney announced two brand new Cars-themed attractions in 2023. There is no visible construction activity behind either wall. The cranes that were there in 2024 are gone. The hard hats are gone. The site looks paused. Walk 20 miles west, off Disney property, to an enormous undeveloped parcel of land along Western Way that Disney publicly committed to developing as part of a multi-decade expansion. The land is still grass. There is no foundation. There is no permit board. There is nothing visible at all. In September of 2023, Disney announced a $17 billion investment in Florida over the following 10 years. By 2024, that number had been publicly repositioned by Disney executives as part of a roughly $60 billion global experiences division investment. The promise was the largest expansion in the history of Walt Disney World. The promise was specifically made to the state of Florida, to the city of Orlando, to the construction industry that surrounds the resort, and to a generation of fans who had been told for years that Disney World was finally going to grow again. The specific decision, made quietly inside Disney's executive suite sometime in late 2024, that explains why almost none of that promised investment has actually materialized on Florida ground, is something I need you to hear. Because what happened between Disney's September 2023 announcement and the empty Western Way parcel today is not really a story about a delayed construction schedule. It is a story about what corporate promises mean when the only people watching them are the customers and the workers. We are going to walk through what Disney actually committed to in 2023, the political fight that drove the announcement, the quiet schedule slippages that followed, and the single line buried in Disney's most recent 10K filing that tells you exactly how serious the company still is about the promise. To understand how a $60 billion headline became a series of paused construction sites, you have to go back to a Florida state legislature meeting in April of 2022. In April of 2022, the state of Florida passed legislation that effectively dissolved the Reedy Creek Improvement District, the special governance zone that had allowed Disney to self-administer the land around Walt Disney World since 1967. The trigger was political. Then CEO Bob Chapek had publicly opposed a Florida education law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis. The governor responded by moving to strip Disney of its long-standing self-governance privileges. The fight escalated through 2022 and into 2023. Disney filed a federal lawsuit alleging the governor had retaliated against the company for protected political speech. Florida countersued. Bob Iger returned to Disney as CEO in November of 2022 and inherited the fight. By the spring of 2023, the Disney expansion plans that had been quietly in development for years were caught directly in the middle of the political battle. Construction permits required approval from the new state-controlled board that had replaced Reedy Creek. Disney's investment in Florida had become politically conditional in a way it had never been before. And then in September of 2023, Disney made its move. On September 19, 2023, Disney publicly announced a 10-year, $17 billion investment commitment to Walt Disney World. The press release included specific commitments: up to 2,000 new hotel rooms, expansion of the existing parks, new attractions across all 4 gates, tens of thousands of construction jobs. The announcement was timed deliberately. It came in the middle of the lawsuit. It was meant to demonstrate publicly that Disney was still committed to Florida regardless of the political fight. The state took the bait. Negotiations began. By June of 2024, Disney and the state-controlled district reached a 15-year development agreement. The lawsuit was eventually settled. The political fight quietly ended. Then the number got bigger. At Disney's Experiences Investor Day, also held in September of 2023, Bob Iger expanded the framing. The $17 billion Florida commitment was repositioned as part of a larger $60 billion global investment in the Disney Experiences division over the following decade. Iger told investors that Disney would roughly double its capital spending across all parks and cruises worldwide, with Florida specifically receiving the largest share of the domestic investment. The promises got specific: reimagining Frontierland with a Cars-themed area, reimagining Adventureland with a Tropical Americas expansion, reimagining Animal Kingdom's Dinoland into a new themed area, new attractions in Epcot, expansion of Disney's Hollywood Studios, 3 new Disney cruise ships including the Treasure, the Destiny, and the Adventure, a villain-themed land somewhere on property, hotel expansion at multiple resorts. By the end of 2023, every single one of those commitments had been publicly announced. The construction walls started going up across all 4 parks in early 2024. Tom Sawyer Island closed permanently in July of 2025 to make way for the Cars expansion. Dinoland closed permanently in February of 2026 to make way for the Tropical Americas expansion. Demolition equipment showed up, fences went up. Disney's official position was that work was progressing on schedule. And then, quietly, almost nothing happened next. Here is what Disney's own financial disclosures now show. In Disney's fiscal 2025 10-K filing, the company's actual capital expenditure on the experiences division was approximately $7.1 billion for the full year. That is meaningfully below the run rate required to actually deliver a $60 billion investment over 10 years. $60 billion divided by 10 is $6 billion per year. Disney spent above that rate in 2025, but the year-over-year increase in actual Florida construction spend was significantly lower than what the public announcement had implied. More importantly, the projects themselves quietly began slipping. The Cars-themed expansion of Frontierland, originally announced for a 2027 opening, was repositioned in late 2025 communications to a 2028 or 2029 opening with no specific date provided. The Tropical Americas expansion in Adventureland, announced for 2027, has been quietly walked back to a no firm date timeline. The Villains-themed land, announced as a major Magic Kingdom expansion, has not had a public construction update in nearly a year. Disney has not formally canceled any of these projects. Disney has simply stopped giving specific dates. And the cruise expansion, the most expensive single piece of the $60 billion promise, has had its delivery dates for the Adventure and several follow-on ships pushed by between 6 months and 2 years, depending on which vessel you look at. Meyer-Werft, the German shipyard building most of the new fleet, has publicly confirmed delays in its own filings. The construction industry around Orlando noticed first. Local trade publications reported in mid-2025 that several of the contractors awarded Disney expansion work in 2024 had been quietly told to scale back staffing as their portions of the work were postponed. The Orlando Sentinel reported in early 2026 that hotel construction jobs across the Disney property had declined by approximately 20% year over year, despite Disney having publicly committed to up to 2,000 new hotel rooms. The state of Florida, which had finalized the development agreement in 2024 on the strength of the $17 billion commitment, has so far made no public statement about the slipping schedule. Governor DeSantis, having declared political victory in the broader Disney fight in 2024, has had no political incentive to highlight the slippage. So the slippage is happening quietly, with no one in the state government with both the visibility and the motive to call attention to it. Here is the math. Disney publicly committed to $17 billion in Florida investment over 10 years, framed inside a larger $60 billion global experiences commitment. The commitment was made in September of 2023, in the middle of a federal lawsuit, with the explicit purpose of demonstrating ongoing corporate commitment to Florida while Disney was simultaneously suing the state's governor. The lawsuit settled. The political pressure ended. And the investment, by Disney's own financial disclosures and by visible construction activity on Florida ground, has been quietly, deliberately, and substantially slowed. There is a name for this kind of corporate behavior. The business press calls it an aspirational capital commitment. The legal industry calls it a forward-looking statement, which is the exact phrase Disney's own 10K filings use to disclaim any obligation to actually deliver on the commitments the company publicly announces. Disney has not lied. Disney is fully within its legal rights to revise, defer, or quietly cancel any of the specific projects it has announced as part of the $60 billion commitment. The promise was always conditional. The conditions were never specified out loud. But the people on the receiving end of the promise were given every reasonable signal that the commitment was real. The state of Florida settled its lawsuit on that basis. Orlando construction contractors hired and trained workers on that basis. The travel industry built marketing campaigns around the expansion on that basis. Disney fans planned trips around the expansion on that basis. And every one of those constituencies is now sitting in a different room with the same uncomfortable realization. The corporate announcement that anchored their decision-making was never as firm as the press release implied. What is happening to Disney's $60 billion Florida promise is exactly what is happening to corporate America's relationship with promised infrastructure investment generally. Intel announced and then dramatically scaled back a $20 billion Ohio chip fabrication facility. Foxconn announced and then dramatically scaled back a $10 billion Wisconsin manufacturing complex. Amazon announced and then dramatically scaled back the second headquarters New York rejected and Virginia accepted. The pattern is identical every time. A massive public commitment is announced with political fanfare. Local governments and workers reorganize their plans around the commitment. The commitment is then quietly walked back over the following months and years without a formal cancellation, without a single press release acknowledging the rollback, without anyone in a position of corporate authority taking responsibility for the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. Disney is the most visible version of this story because Walt Disney World is the most physically present corporate asset in the state of Florida. But Disney is not unusual. Disney is just operating inside the same playbook every other major American corporation is running. The promised investment is real until the political pressure to deliver it ends. The moment that pressure ends, the promise quietly becomes optional. The construction walls inside Magic Kingdom are still up. The posters on the walls still show the future attractions Disney committed to building. The cast members at the gate still tell guests, when asked about the timeline, that the projects are progressing. The empty parcel on Western Way is still owned by Disney, and the $60 billion number is still on Disney's investor relations website, attached to the original September 2023 announcement with no public revision. The promise is still officially in effect. The promise is also increasingly a number that does not match what is actually happening on Florida ground. And somewhere in a Burbank office, an executive is reviewing the same capital expenditure forecast the public never gets to see and quietly noting that the political reason for making the original commitment no longer exists.